On this episode of NorCal News Now, we're chatting with Republican congressional candidate Gregory Cheadle. I'm your co-host, Mike Richman.
And I'm political weatherman Aaron Haar.
You're taking the temperature of the political scene. That is very apropos.
It's been hot.
Has it been hot and stormy?
Yes.
It's been stormy in Washington, I know that.
Yes.
It's been stormy.
It's been stormy.
We don't talk about Stormy very much on this show. We really probably should.
Yeah.
Talk about her and her work.
Yeah, I think she's going to run for office.
You know, she did run for office. She ran for office in 2006.
Wow.
In Louisiana.
Oh.
But we're not talking about that candidate. We're going to talk about a different candidate today rather than Stormy Daniels. Our guest on today's show is Gregory Cheadle, a Reading-based businessman and Republican candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives right here in District 1. He's hoping to get through the June primary where where only the top two candidates are going to run against each other in the November general, of course. And if that happens, if he does get through, he'd almost certainly find himself going up against current Representative Doug LaMalfa. So, Gregory Cheadle, welcome to NorCal News Now.
It is good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Yeah,
glad to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you. It's great. Well, you know, we've been doing a lot of coverage of the upcoming June 5th primary. It's only a few weeks away.
Sure.
Yep, we've been talking about it a lot. And you know, we've been hearing a little bit of confusion about how the runoff's going to work. I mean, the primary isn't determining the top Republican, top Democrat,
no, it isn't,
as other primaries do, but it's determining the top two popular candidates.
Top two go-getters.
Yeah, whoever gets the most votes, the top two are going to face off regardless of party.
You could have two Republicans, two Democrats, two independents, whatever.
Whatever. It's a different system. So with 4 or 5 Democrats possibly splitting that Democratic vote, it's entirely possible you could find yourself the second top vote getter after presumably Doug LaMalfa. So how would you feel about that going up against LaMalfa in the general?
Well, you know, I've been working at this for so long that it would just feel so good to finally see my hard work and perspiration pay off.
Yeah, we should say
it feel good.
We should say to the viewers, the listeners out there, this isn't your first rodeo.
No.
You've run for four or five cycles.
This is my fourth time.
Fourth
running.
cycle, that you've run in this, and this is you're increasingly kind of pegging up and getting more support. So
yeah, people are seeing that I'm not a joke anymore. I'm taken seriously,
right.
So it makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. But again, as the top two, you potentially would face LaMalfa. I mean, you've already been doing it in some of the debates where Cheadle has not been at, but
right.
You have already been kind of drawing the distinctions between yourself and him, as well as the Democrats that are in this race and the green people in the race.
Yeah, what do we have? We have 5 people. You know.
Four Democrats and a real strong green candidate.
Yeah, so that liberal vote's going to be watered down considerably, hopefully. But I've worked hard all these years, and it would be nice to see some good results from it.
You've worn out a lot of pairs of shoes.
Oh, suits too, man.
Well, let me give you the data because that's where I fit in. And
all right, data man, go ahead.
Okay, well, this is a midterm primary.
This is straight from a cell phone. This is straight from a smartphone.
It's a midterm primary. So so let's look at the 2014. That was the last midterm primary. Heidi Hall got 31,000 votes, and Dan Levine, a Democrat, got 6,000. That's about 37,000. Okay, well, registration numbers are up. So let's say there's 40-some thousand votes. You got 5 candidates splitting, like you say, the liberal vote. That's going to come in somewhere about 8,500 to 9,000. Well, let's say a Democrat gets 10,000. You, Gregory Cheadle, got 10,061 votes, 9.7% in that year. And I tell you, that was 10,001 vote might be enough to do it. So, okay, and there's some people out there. Well, there's a lot of blue wave. Things will be more like the 2016 midterm. So let's look at the 26 midterm. Jim Reed got 60,000 votes, and the other Democrat, David Peterson, who I'm sorry we couldn't get on the show in time for the midterm. He got 13,000 votes. He was the first guy on the ticket. And you got 4,200 votes, but you split it with Gerlach, you split it with Oxley, who all came in about the same, and that was the race that Joe Montez was in, where he took 35,000 votes. I think he took some moderates, even some Democratic votes of people who really wanted to oust LaMalfa, and I had that argument early on before any candidates run of like, if a friend, having a Republican go against him would maybe be the most likely scenario of actually beating him.
Yeah.
However, they'll be splitting, even if you go by those primary numbers, they're going to be splitting about 70,000. But when you look at it, Doug LaMalfa had 8,600 votes and Joe Montez had 30. So there's about 100,000 votes on the Republican side. If Doug got his 60, it's easily 10,000 votes. And I think you could be the
I can get those
sleeper in this election. And how does that make you feel?
Well, I feel good. I mean, I've always felt good. I mean,
what do you feel your chances are?
Every election, I think my chances are great. I don't have this. I mean, you crunch numbers. I don't crunch numbers because I have to stay focused on what I want to do. And I say that sincerely in that if I looked at numbers, I wouldn't be here today. I wasn't supposed to graduate from high school. I wasn't supposed to go to college. On and on and on. And if you start looking at numbers, me personally, if I start looking at numbers, then it would shape my way of thinking.
Takes away your focus.
Yeah, it takes away my focus. And I have to stay razor sharp on what I want to do and what I want to accomplish, no matter what the odds are. I think my chances are great. This is the first time that I've seen billboards attacking LaMalfa. Prior it was just, a few people not very happy, but now there are giant billboards on I-5 critical of him. And so he's lost a lot of support, and he may even lose more support, given this farm bill that's coming up. So I think my chances are pretty good. There are people who are, and as far as I'm concerned, Doug's a nice guy. I don't have a problem with him.
You and him are friends.
We're friends, yeah. But, politically, I think that he's doing things that are jeopardizing his chances of continuing to win.
But if you were to emerge from the primary, it seems to me, and I know Aaron just ran through the numbers, it seems to me that there would need to be a degree of Republicans who kind of strategically decided not to vote for Doug and to vote for you instead. People that are going into the ballot box in a couple of weeks and saying, okay, well, let me think about this. I want to make sure that we're not going to have a Democrat, even though, obviously Doug's the incumbent. They're going to say, well, I'm going to vote for Doug maybe in the general, but for now I'm going to vote for Cheadle because I don't want a Democrat going up against LaMalfa. Mm-hmm. So does that factor in any way in how you shape your message at this stage? Or again, do you not even worry about it?
No, I'm not. My message has been the same from day one, basically, with respect to the general versus the primary. I mean, I got a call about a week or so ago from someone high-ranking, questioning me about, my thoughts and the process, so forth and so on, because they wanted to vote for me and not Mr. LaMalfa. And I was astonished because this is not just someone off the street. This is someone, up there. And so there's a growing number of people who are dissatisfied with him. And so that, it's good for me, but it's also good for the country because we need people in government who are of by and for the people. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would be.
Now, have you been a Republican all your life?
No.
So what's your political journey been? What's your political journey been like?
It's been amazing. I mean, I grew up Democrat, basically. I mean, I didn't know any better. One of the first things that happened to me, I was in Cleveland, and I was outside my father's shoe shine shop, and Carl B. Stokes was the first black mayor of a major city. He was walking down the street, and he looked at me and said something about "Hi, young man," or whatever it was, and shook my hand. And I was like blown away that this guy would shake my hand.
How old are you?
I was little. I don't know what
10 or something, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere somewhere probably between 8 and 10. Yeah. But he shook my hand. I was like, wow, this is this. I mean, because he was a full blown celebrity at that point. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, time went on, but the turning factor for me with respect to Democrat versus Republican was when I went to D.C. for Clinton's second inauguration. My cousin called me, says, "Hey, you want to go to D.C. to inaugurate?" I said, "Sure." Inner city guy wants to see the president. Sure, yeah, I'll go. And so I went, and I was like, I'm going to see Democrats who are for the people. Yeah. And I went there, and I was so disillusioned because every party I went to, every function that I went to, it was all about money and power. It wasn't about helping the poor people. And I was just I left disillusioned, and I got back home and I started researching the parties, Democrat and Republican. And I came across the history of the Republican Party, and I just could not ignore it. I mean, those white Republicans killed, shot, set on fire, lynched, along with the black slaves that they were trying to free. I just could not ignore that history. And so to bring it forward to today, I had to brand myself an 1856 Republican as opposed to a modern Republican, because I can't stomach what modern Republicans are doing, because they're selfish. In 1856, they were not selfish. They were selfless. Mm-hmm. And so that's been my journey.
Well, what about, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of people don't maybe understand the history of the parties, especially the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And it really has changed in the last 100 and whatever years.
Oh, yeah.
But the 1856 Republicans at that time kind of, in a certain sense, grew out of this Whig brand. And there's Know Nothing party. There was a bunch of different, more conservative parties at that time that were forming, and a lot of foment that really don't have, maybe still do have today. But the question is really, at a certain point, a party's brand becomes tarnished, or becomes, the people become disillusioned with it, and out of that comes something else. Mm-hmm. So do you think we're at a stage like that now? I was going to ask you about the Republican Party, but maybe with the Democratic Party too.
I think that both parties are due for an overhaul. And they're due for an overhaul, not because of necessarily idealistic views, but because both parties have been corrupted by corporate money. And so the average Democrat, the average Republican does not like what's happening to their party, because they see, this deal was made, that deal was made. And everybody, Democrat and Republican, suffers. When I go to the gas pump now, it doesn't say click if you're a Democrat or click if you're Republican and get a different price. Everybody's suffering. The same thing with housing, same thing with interest rates. Everybody suffers. And so I think both parties are due for a we the people movement, as opposed to letting the stuff go on and on with corporations and special interests taking control.
Mm-hmm. In California, currently, independents have really shot up in registration, and they are looking, the feat of inevitability will say that they will pass Republicans at some point.
I believe it.
Possibly the next general election.
Wow.
So, do you feel like you're going that way, or where's the party in? It seems like maybe they've gone a little too much with Trump's rhetoric and bought into that stock of, oh, that's what our party wants, when maybe Donald Trump was elected because people thought he was going to be a moderate. And he wasn't a politician, and they thought, well, this guy's not going to be either way. He's going to be middle of the road.
Yeah. Well,
but he has really curbed things to that base that he thinks that, elected him.
Well,
that portion of the country.
I like to see myself as someone who is starting a movement, as opposed to settling and compromising and becoming part of the status quo. I think people look at me, hopefully they look at me and they see someone who is not willing to be molded or to conform to the norms, conform to the status quo, but someone who says, this isn't me. This is me. This is who I am. And so the Republican Party is ripe for that type of person to come along and change. Trump appealed to a certain mindset. He said things. And I don't know that every Republican agrees with what he's doing and has done and has said. But enough of them were convinced that what he was saying was going to be true and he was going to do these things. And so he won.
Well, you see the congressional Republicans really holding on to that stock. But then you see the Senate Republicans, especially yesterday, coming out with the acknowledgement, bipartisan acknowledgement that Russia messed with our election to help Donald Trump and hurt Hillary Clinton. So it seems like the Senate Republicans are selling that stock. Mm-hmm. And if they're not, and then the congressional Republicans who wanted to sell the stock have just flat out quit, including the speaker.
Yeah.
So did you go to the convention?
No.
Okay.
No.
You don't seem like somebody that is concerned with other races like governor or anything like that.
No, you know,
Because we had Travis Allen on the show, and it was a lot about party versus party versus party. And you've said on this show, stop making it about the party and let's make it about the people. And
yeah, I've heard Travis speak, and it was more like a show than anything else. I didn't feel. Well, I'm not going to
little,
but everybody has got to develop the mindset that we, the people, that's the government, not the Democrats or Republicans. We, the people, because the country's in deep trouble because we are split, and we're often split over sideshows, the abortion issue, the gay issue, whatever. We're split on those at the cost of economics, jobs and just the Constitution, freedom, so forth and so on.
Healthcare, yeah.
And so imagine what the United States could do if we were united as a people. Nothing could stop us. Nothing. And I think corporations and special interests know that. And so they want to keep us divided. They want to keep the Republicans and the Democrats, apart. But man, the power that this country could have if we got together as one group and force what we wanted, oh man, it would be incredible.
Well, I mean, I think you're right, because I think that you look at some of these special interests and you have them on both sides. Let's be honest. I mean, we talk about the NRA, we talk about the Koch brothers, but we also talk about Planned Parenthood. We also talk about, a lot of interests that are seeking to divide more than they are. And, you add into that this idea of the Russian collusion and or the Russian interference. I don't even know if I want to call it collusion because I don't know that I necessarily buy that. Well, here's the thing. I don't know that I buy it because I don't know that there was a grand plan. I think the grand plan was
like
chaos.
Qatar bought it from Russia and then paid Jared Kushner.
But what I'm saying is the grand plan to me at this stage looks like chaos. The plan, if Putin had a plan, it was for chaos.
And yes.
And I don't know that he necessarily even was saying, well, I think he probably was wishing that Trump would be president and wanted to help because he figured Trump would be more of a chaotic president than Clinton would be. And it makes sense to me. But, but what I'm saying is all these things are seeking to kind of be like a centrifuge pulling us that way rather than bringing us together. And your point is really good. I mean, you look at critical events in the country's history, bad events, things that have happened that have been really, really horrible, 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. When that country comes together, man, it's just incredible the power that a United States can have.
But this country has some stains on it.
Of course.
From times where we have put in freedom or liberty ahead of things. After Pearl Harbor, we detained and put in internment camps Japanese citizens.
There's a lot
So there's a little bit of that right now.
That
history has already judged this time. And the Republicans trying having an anti-immigrant tone that ends up on the streets. It ends up on the subways. And having a president that doesn't fully condemn hate groups or these things. It ends up on a street. We have candidates running for governor in our own state or Senate governor. They're popping up all over. It's really grown this thing. So Russia has won. And if you're angry at a politician on either side, if you're on the far left and you are so super angry, if you are on the far right and you're flipping off protesters and yelling at them, take a break.
Let me ask you this. What do you think of Obama? First African-American president. I mean, what was your take on him as a politician? In terms of some of the race issues? I mean, did you feel that he did a good job?
You weren't a fan. I have you on the record.
Well, I was, to me, Obama was an opportunist. I lost respect for Obama when he was down in the South, doing the Martin Luther King thing. And that just offended me because King was killed, took a bullet. He was not one of those, what I call a GQ leader, trying to get in magazines and get endorsements and all that. King, that guy sacrificed. And then for, Obama to do what he did, I just didn't, it was a major turnoff to me. Also, another problem that we have as far as the blacks is concerned is that for the longest, Obama was not accepted by the black people. Because he wasn't black, he was African. He was at the most half African, and so we did not embrace him initially, but they did a great marketing job and, repackaged him. And so he was accepted.
There was a pushback marketing job on that too. And Donald Trump had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, there was. And so perhaps I was more hard on Obama than I should have been. But it was good to see a black person in the White House. So in retrospect, I'd probably say I was harder on him than I.
In retrospect to Trump? I don't see Trump singing Amazing Grace. I'd like to see that, though. Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, I would too. I would too, yeah.
I think that he's being humbled. I think his wife is in the hospital. Being in the hospital is humbling him. Yeah. I think he's beginning to see that he is not able to snap his fingers and have things happen like he was accustomed to. You're a billionaire. Hey, do this, do that. But now, your woman is sick. She's in the hospital. She's been there several days. I don't know how much longer she's going to be in. So I think he's learning, perhaps slowly, but I think he is beginning to see what life is really like for other people, aside from the way he grew up and the way he had been living prior to the presidency.
Yeah, it's a humbling experience. I mean, people that have had that job will tell you that you come in there with all these ideas and you very quickly run up against the walls of limitations, right? I mean, it's a limited, constitutionally, it's intended to be a limited office.
Thank God for that, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean that, thank God for that, because I think that our government works really well when those three wings, those three elements all work in tandem and work against each other sometimes too.
Otherwise, we'd have a dictator overnight.
Absolutely. Potentially, it's very powerful office, but think how much more powerful it could be. Let me, if it's okay with you, Aaron, let me kind of change up a little bit here, because I want to ask you about an issue that's really been front and center for a lot of Californians, is a sanctuary state debate, and it's one that is really. Because again, we've talked to a number of people running for various offices here throughout the state, and you see people come down on it in very, very many different ways, not just two ways, but a lot of different ways. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the states? And again, I know you're just running within this district, but in general, how do you feel about this idea that California would seek to be a sanctuary against ICE and in favor of illegal, undocumented immigrants?
The problem I have with it is, given the history of blacks in this country, we've gone through hell. And when we have every other group that comes in here, puts us off the bus and we get run over. And so I'm tired of it in that respect. The sanctuary state is also an issue with respect to human trafficking. That's one of the larger issues for me, is that we have laws, but we don't want to enforce them. We want to be exempt from these laws. So now in my mind, we invite human trafficking, and that really concerns me. And that's pretty much how I feel about the.
What about the DACA people? What about the DACA people who have played by the rules, paid their money, worked their job, kept their head down? A lot of them. Very hard to get citizenship. It's hard when you came here at 5 years old and you don't have the documentation and you don't have the paperwork, and hard to find everything. Takes a long time. A lot of them have become legal U.S. citizens, but
do
you think that is a trade, if you're in Congress, of giving some protections, a little bit of amnesty to people who have generally committed less crime than anybody born here and have succeeded just as well or better than anybody born here?
I hear what you're saying. A couple of things. One of the phrases I often hear is that we're a nation of immigrants. And the problem I have with that is that we're not really a nation of immigrants. We're a nation in which immigrants came over, decimated the native peoples, trafficked and stolen people from Africa to build colossal fortunes. And now we have a system in place whereby those groups are not able to achieve the American dream because of policies that were put in place to make certain they would not achieve the American dream. So when it comes to DACA, again, being kicked off the bus, the numbers keep changing. I heard it was 800,000, 700,000, 1.2, 1.8. I don't know what those numbers are. And what really saddens me about DACA is there's also a racial element in it, in that when I hear whites talk about these DACA people, well, no one else is going to do these jobs. I got news for you. Those people are in schools. They're starting businesses. They did not come over here to pick grapes.
Yeah, right.
They're doctors. They're lawyers. Yeah.
Right. No,
And they're a huge, tax revenue for our government. 800,000 people paying into Social Security.
Yeah. And so I just have a problem with it from the point of we as blacks have been denied opportunity. And now this group wants the opportunities, and they appear to be given the opportunities. And so it doesn't sit well with me because, again, it's another group that's kicking us off the bus.
There's a lot of racial discussion within the parties. The Republicans will say many times that, like we heard Trump say this during the campaign, that, what have the Democrats done for African-American communities, right? I mean, and historically, at least for the last several decades, he's right. That has been a huge block. What was it, 90? It's been 90% in some elections that have voted for Democrats. It's unbelievable how loyal, generally across the country.
And without reason.
That's what I'm saying.
Without reason.
So was Trump right in that? Was he right to say that, African Americans should look at that and say, well, what have they done for you?
Well, I can't dispute him. And we as blacks have got to stop being so readily available to any particular party. The party needs to court us. The party needs to say, this is what we will do for you, and stick to it and do it. Then you can get our vote. But this blind allegiance to the Democrat Party, I don't understand it. I don't accept it, and I don't do it. If blacks were to make the parties court them, say, this is what we are going. Look at the gay vote. Parties been over backwards for the gay people, to do whatever. And so we need to have that same, and we need to recognize that we have that power. If black people said, you know what, you'll get my vote if you do this, if you do that, it would be a big difference. But when we just roll over and say, okay, I'm going to vote Democrat because my parents were Democrats, because my great-grand, whatever, instead of saying, you know what are you going to do for me? It's the Janet Jackson song. What have you done for me lately?
I want to get into your background a little
Sure,
quick.
go ahead. Yeah.
So you grew up in Cleveland.
And Oakland.
And what happened then?
My parents divorced. And so my father lived in Cleveland, and my father lived in Cleveland, my mother lived in Oakland. And so I lived in Cleveland early because my father literally came to Oakland and kidnapped my sister and I. He told my mother he was going to take us to the park. He was going to take us to a park in Cleveland. So
wow, that's a long trip.
It was a long trip. Yeah, so he kidnapped us.
Wow.
I forgot how old I was, but kidnapped us and ended up in Cleveland. And Cleveland was an interesting city, very segregated at the time. Well, segregation wasn't in place at the time, so blacks could not live anywhere else. It's like Jim Brown was a famous football player at the time.
River was on fire.
Well, before the river was on fire. Okay. But no, Jim Brown was the Michael Jordan of football.
Yeah.
And I asked Jim, this was years ago, I asked him where he lived when he was playing for Cleveland. And he lived in the inner city when he was playing because of segregation.
Red line, is that what that was called?
Redlining as far as the loans.
What neighborhood, with the loan application process. Yeah. That was firmly in place in those days.
Firmly in place.
Yeah. It was almost impossible.
Right. Legally, you had housing restrictions as well. That no blacks were allowed to purchase homes and so forth, and it had pretty much the de facto blessing of government to keep it that way as well.
Cleveland's a very proud and tough city. People there are very proud of being there.
They are. Yeah.
So let's talk about schooling. Where did you go from there?
You mean as far as high school or college?
Kind of your educational background.
Okay, well, it was so touching for me to be on a college campus. Growing up, it's always told, well, go to college. And so finally to be able to, when I stepped foot on that campus, this was Cal State Hayward, now it's called Cal State East Bay. But when I stepped foot on that campus, I almost started crying because I remember all the stuff that my father went through. And so for me to be the recipient of this freedom was overwhelming.
That's powerful, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was just like, wow. I mean, like if my father could see where his son is today, where he's been, he wouldn't believe it.
So what did you study there?
Man, I was like a kid in a candy store. I had like several majors.
Hard to decide, yeah.
Because, I mean, to have been denied education for so long and now to have that open up, I was like, I spent a lot of time in the library, took classes, but I ended up doing psychology because I was interested in what the mind was, not only how it thought, but why it thought that way. So I studied physiological psychology, and I did pre-med because I wanted to be a pediatrician. So I went on, then I got a graduate degree in public administration. Healthcare administration was my option. Then I applied to medical school, and then life just dealt me this kid with cancer. And so I was interviewed in Oregon, Cleveland, Nebraska. I mean, right when you're about to capture your dream, your life just blows up. And so son went through cancer. I mean, went through chemotherapy, 38 months of chemotherapy, seemed like an eternity. Then a few years out of chemo, we were free. We didn't have to be tied to the hospital because prior to that, if he had sneezed, it was another week in the hospital. So, moved up to Reading, went to law school, and here I am running for Congress for the fourth time.
It's incredible. It's an incredible education. You have public administration. Mm-hmm. You have an understanding of the human hierarchy of needs, and especially in relation to healthcare. Mm-hmm. And you have an understanding of the law and Constitution
and business.
That's a pretty good resume
and
for
a
congressperson.
And the body, yeah. Thank you, yeah, it is, and that's why I continue to run, because there's this thing that sticks in my head: of whom much is given, much is required. Mm-hmm. And so I could take the route of making a ton of money for myself and living happily ever after. But again, when I think about my father, when I think about my ancestors, because I remember as a kid, we went down to Mississippi to see, on my father's side, the graves of those slaves that were my relatives. And so I just cannot stomach selfishness where I just want to make money for me, drive a big car and live in a nice house. And so it just feels good to instead use that energy, use those talents and that education to make society better. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to do that. I mean, you think about that. We all have our ancestry, mm-hmm. whether it's in Europe or down south or mm-hmm. wherever it may be. And, maybe we don't think enough about our forebears and what was expected of us from the opportunities we have. I mean, right. I don't know. I mean, I think all of us here, I certainly feel this way. This is the greatest country in the world. I mean, I'm so proud to be an American. I'm so proud to have the opportunity to live here mm-hmm. and pursue anything I want. I feel very free in this country and to have debates. I mean, I'm a Democrat. Right. You're a Republican. I mean,
are you?
Yeah, I'm a Democrat. I consider myself a Democrat. Sure. Centrist Democrat.
No, that's fine. I mean, and the thing is, we're here.
We're here.
And we're discussing.
And it's so great that we can be here. But sometimes I think we get so caught up in the present moment of, and maybe not even so positively, where we're having a nice discussion, where we get caught up in the my corner, your corner, let's fight, where we say, let's take a moment and step back and say, we're here in America. We have these opportunities to have these discussions, mm-hmm. participate in the political process, be the change we want to see in the world.
And that's why I'm always at Democrat functions.
Yeah.
I don't say the Republican Party. I mean, I went to that gun thing in Chico. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, that was not a place for Republicans to be.
Right.
But I went there anyway, because I'm all about, exchanging ideas.
Yeah.
And before I get into the next thing, but you said to me once, I'm meant to be in Washington D.C. I'm meant to be in Congress. That's why I keep running.
When
you feel like you can navigate that, and you feel like you're, that's the place for you. That's where you should be.
Well, yeah, that's the place I should be, and I run that way because I want to be able to speak freely. And you can't speak freely when you're entangled with money that was given to you by special interests and corporations and high wealth individuals. And so I shun that. And so that when I am in D.C., I don't have to worry about being someone's puppet. They can bring something to me. I can tell them to get lost. And I don't have to worry about, the consequences. Yeah. And so that's important. And by being meant to be in D.C., I am the best person that has probably run for Congress anywhere north of Sacramento. Interestingly enough, there has never been a black Republican sent to D.C. from California.
Really?
Not one. Not a single black Republican congressperson has been from California.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about all
GOP,
yeah, GOP. I mean, yeah, but you think about all the 55 districts it is here now in California. I mean, you think, but I guess you make a good point. I mean, only 20 or what percent of them are Republican districts anyway, are typically red districts. But still, it's a lot of elections.
I mean, a state with nearly 40 million people,
and we haven't
sent a single black Republican to D.C.
Well, let me ask this. Okay, let's say you get sent to D.C. in November. Who are you going to caucus with? I mean, I assume you're not going to caucus with the Jim Jordans of the world and the Freedom Caucus folks. Though maybe you would. I don't know. Who would you consider would be, as you look at the Congress, those hundreds and hundreds of seats? Who would you naturally, do you think, gravitate towards that is there now? Or can you not even say that at this point?
I don't know. I mean, I would want to associate with people who are like-minded. And the benefit of me being in D.C. Is that they would see that this guy has guts to do what he's done. So maybe now I'll get a backbone myself. I'll stand on principle.
Right.
And so, for me, it's a matter of wanting and looking for people who are like-minded, Democrat or Republican. I don't have time to play the R&D game. Whoever is going to fall on the side of we the people, that's where I want to be.
As you talked about being at the gun event, and I saw you did the March for Our Lives in Reading, or was that in Reading or Chico?
That was Chico.
Oh, was it?
Wait. There were several marches.
Well, you had an event in Chico, I think.
Right.
But...
That was March for Our Lives when they had the El Rey.
Okay.
The El Rey Theater. But physically marching, and marched up in Reading for a couple events.
Yeah. Well, how was that?
The Reading one?
Yeah, how was that day for you?
I was pretty good. I think, those events are heavily Democratic, or Democrats, and so they see me and they smile. I don't see any Republicans. I'm having fun. You know what? I'm going to have fun no matter who I'm with.
Yeah, but you had a scary experience when you were younger with guns and almost.
Oh
gun
yeah,
violence.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was in Cleveland, and we lived in the ghetto. And so one late afternoon, my father said, go get some milk and bread. And so I went to this corner store. We had these little corner stores, these anti-Walmart things, And so black male owner. And so it was, like it was smaller than the studio, much smaller than the studio. And so, I remember I had a leather coat on, and I reached in my pocket like this to get the money because I had a pocket here. And so I'm at the counter, I reach in my pocket to pay, and the owner flinches. He does this flinch, and I'm like, does he have some physical difficulty? And lo and behold, he said, man, I almost blew you away. And I looked, and he had a gun pointed at me, and he had his finger on the trigger, and he said something told him not to shoot. And I was just so scared because I had never seen a gun before. And to think that my life was almost taken away from me for just being innocent, for looking like I was going to do something. The only thing I was going to do was pay. I wasn't going to rob the guy. I was just going to pay. And so it was a very disconcerting moment. I left angry. After I almost soiled my pants, then the emotion became one of anger that my life was almost taken away from me.
Yeah. Yeah. The shopkeeper was black as well, though.
Yeah, the shopkeeper. Yeah, black and black. Yeah.
Yeah. But he was intimidated by you. He felt like you were going to rob him.
Yeah, I was going to rob him. I'm like, no, I'm not.
So you learned never to do that again.
I threw that coat away.
So
bad idea. Yeah.
The March for Our Lives, the Second Amendment. There's something that I guess I should say, because I talked to you about it before, is the rapper Killer Mike and talking and speaking from, I guess, for the black community or for a community of color, says that when we enact laws like, if we were to take away the Second Amendment, or if we enact laws like different, let's be tough on crime or anything, those types of laws go and affect communities of color first and worst. And they really have a way of tearing apart those communities of color before they reach, the picket fences, or before they reach even rural areas. So do Democrats need to kind of take measure of those communities of color in regards to the Second Amendment issue before they scream to get rid of it, and because you have those communities that absolutely need to have protection, but then also do believe in that type of Second Amendment of a tyrannical government, because some of those communities are living in tyranny right now.
When you look at guns, period, in the United States, the first gun laws were enacted against blacks because they didn't want blacks to own guns because they were afraid that they were going to kill the slave masters. But when you look at how, for instance, March for Our Lives, when you look at the contrast between March for Our Lives and Black Lives Matter, when March for Our Lives, everyone's supportive, blah blah blah, celebrities. But when you have Black Lives Matter, all of a sudden you have the police surrounding them. It's just crazy. And those laws, when you look at the policymakers, that's what I'm talking about as far as me being meant to be in D.C., bringing a sane voice to D.C. When you look at the policymakers, they tend to be white. They tend to live in gated communities. They are so distant from the crimes. The majority of homicides in this country are committed by handguns, not by AR-15s. But yet and still they want to outlaw the AR-15 because these kids got killed in this school. And these white kids weren't black kids. White kids got shot, and black kids got shot by an AR-15. Who cares? But these policymakers, they see things, very narrow because their life experience is narrow. They don't hang out in the inner city. They don't hang out with black people. They don't hang out with anyone but themselves. They're in the country club, so forth and so on. And so it's easy for them to make these decisions based on their egocentricity. That's it. They don't see outside that box. But when I go to any inner city, I want protection. I want to be able to defend myself. I don't want to go out. I don't want to have a gun just so I can shoot someone at random. I want to protect myself. I was in Atlanta. I wanted to go to the MLK, whatever, center. And I took the MARTA because I had a long layover. And so I took the MARTA, which is the southern version of BART train. And I started walking down this neighborhood, and, my brothers were there. And the further I walked, the more I realized that there were more brothers looking at me. And finally I said, they're looking at me for the wrong reason. I'm going back to the airport. And so I went back to the airport. The point being is that I want to be able to defend myself. In that case, I was not able to defend myself. I didn't have a gun. All the laws said, no, you can't carry a gun on the plane, blah, blah, blah. And so the inner city is a place where you need to be able to protect yourself. You work hard for your possessions, and some fool is going to come and take those things away from you because you are unarmed. No. I want to be able to protect my possessions. I want to be able to protect my family. And that's what needs to be discussed, is that certain areas are more prone to violence, and you need to be protected as opposed to calling 911 and it's too late.
Yeah. So when Gavin Newsom put out a email or message and something on Facebook saying, no, I do not want your NRA endorsement. I'm honored to get an F by the NRA. And I can't wait till you're demolished. And I can't wait till we, and I don't think he talked anything about the Second Amendment. But when you do hear Democrats say they,
Well, John Paul Stevens talked about that.
Yeah.
Former justice.
We can do it. We can get rid of this.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like they're very in touch with communities of color who may not be able to, stand having that based on possibly a tyrannical government that could come in, or possibly based on the fact that they need to protect their families.
Well, and then the thing is, and I agree with this, this NRA talking point is that, the bad guys are going to get guns regardless. And I think that's true. And to me, I'm not in favor of eliminating the Second Amendment. I mean, there are some on the left who are. I'm not. It's an amendment. It's, it's part of our country. It's been part of our country since the start, before the start. So, but I think all these issues, protection against tyrannical government, protection of self and family and stuff that you have.
And if there's any group that understands a tyrannical government, it's black folk. I mean, imagine being dragged from your house and lynched. We had the fugitive slave laws, the anti-lynching laws. I mean, you have to pass a law that makes it illegal to be lynched.
Right.
So we understand what government can do. Left to its own,
and what government can't do, and which is actually protect people a lot of the time, right? I mean,
right.
So it makes sense. You have that point of view. Cassie, about something I know everybody you ever meet asks you about this moment. You know what I'm going to talk about? Reading in 2016.
Oh, Reading. Okay, yeah.
Okay. So many of our listeners probably first heard of you, although you ran an election or two before that. But many people heard you for the first time in the airport in April. It was like 100. August,
it was hot.
105 degrees. Yeah, the heck it was. And Trump flies into the Reading airport for an event. By the way, that his team prevented any of the reporters from getting water. They handed out water to everybody else. But if you're a reporter, he wouldn't give you water.
110 on the tarmac. Something like that.
It was hot.
The worst campaign event possible.
It was, and the reporters were not allowed because it was a fake news press, so they couldn't get water. But anybody else did. Anyway, so you're there.
Yeah.
And Trump flies in, and I guess, and you can relate it better, he kind of looks out amongst this crowd of people, and he sees you, and he says, well, there's my African American over there.
Well,
I don't remember exactly what the verbatim quote was, but I mean, that had to be just a weird, surreal moment for you.
I'm writing a book about this too.
You are? Okay.
Oh yeah, because
everybody does ask you about it.
They see it, and what a mess that was too. But what the media did not show was that Trump was talking about he had an African American fan who was a great man. I raised my hand. Right. I'm just having fun. I'm goofing off.
Me. Yeah.
I'm just goofing
off.
How
many black guys were in that audience that day?
Probably 2.
Yeah. The other one was press.
Well, I mean, I think there were 2 black guys. I saw them after. I didn't saw them after the fact. I didn't see them during.
Yeah.
And there were more blacks in the media than there were in the audience.
Yeah.
So anyway, I said, I'm here. And that's when he looked over and said, "Oh, there's my African American." So the media didn't show that part,
that liberal
which makes it different, right? So they just showed that's my African American, and I still get the blues.
What was your next day like?
Hell,
because everybody.
Your phone was ringing off the hook.
Oh, my phone was. Yeah, I didn't even know.
But you were running at that point.
I was running.
You were in the middle of a campaign at that point. So
that was my last campaign.
Yeah, that was 2016.
Yeah,
right.
No, I mean the next day was. And when I say it was hell, it's like I'm looking at the media because that day I went to sleep after the event because I was just exhausted from the heat. So I went to sleep and I got up and looked at my phone. I had all these messages. I'm like, what is this? And it's all the news outlets, ABC, NBC, all the print press, so New York Times, whatever. And then I got on the internet. I looked at this. I'm like, what? And it was just funny at the time. I thought this could never go anywhere. And it just grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I started looking at my Facebook and people were calling me all types of names, not good names, bad names, and telling me to perform unspeakable acts. Because I couldn't believe that there was so much anger. I mean,
anger from who? From the left or from the right? Or from everybody?
Both. From everybody, from blacks, from whites, from Hispanics. Everybody.
How weird.
Yeah, it was. I'm like,
You didn't do anything.
I didn't do it. And
Yeah.
I mean, just straight out anger, palpable anger, And so I received it on my Facebook. And so there was a time when I didn't go out in public much because everybody knew me, but I didn't know anybody. And so I didn't know what they were thinking. I didn't want to be involved with it. And that's when I want my gun.
I thought you were going to be appointed after that.
I thought, well,
for something.
I thought so too. And it was kind of disappointing that he didn't call me and say, listen, I like you. Can you help me? And so, I mean, whatever. But when you look at, and this is one of the problems I had with Trump, in that prior to him being elected, he talked all this stuff about blacks and, building them up, neighborhoods, so forth and so on. And we have the whitest White House probably since Reagan. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's white. Omarosa's gone. The only one that's there is Carson. That's it. But yet, you're telling me all this stuff about blacks. We're going to build communities. We're going to provide jobs. But you are not leading by example.
You wrote in the LA Times, it did some, what was that, 6 months probably after the election?
I was in the LA Times several times.
Well, I mean, when you kind of withdrew your support, basically, and said that what you heard on the campaign trail, you haven't seen in action.
Right.
And that
I was furious.
You're kind of withdrawing your support. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't, blacks have been played and used for so long. I wasn't going to fall into that. And so I just let it be known that what he was doing was wrong. And that there are real people with real issues, with real desires, and with real wishes who would keep your promises. And so when he didn't, I was through.
Well, as a political meteorologist, I'd like to take your temperature now, because speaking of job creation, there's a lot of positions opening up around the White House and the administration and cabinet.
It's been a carnival.
And
I mean,
if you got a call tomorrow to say, hey, step up, come help your country, come work for Donald Trump and the administration, would you think about it?
I would think about it. If it was something that I could do to be of benefit, yes. To be a token, no. If there was something that I could use my abilities with and do well, I would consider it. But I would hope that would happen after the election. But who knows?
Yeah. Well, if you were elected, there's a not trivial chance. I mean, it depends on how the House falls after this election. But there's a not trivial chance that you might be asked to vote on articles of impeachment for Donald Trump. I mean, obviously the House votes on the articles, and then it's forwarded to the Senate for trial. And it's, let's be honest. I mean, there's about a zero chance that Donald Trump would ever be impeached unless he did actually shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, like you said.
Well, he may just do it.
He may just do it. But I mean, because you need, as everyone knows, you need 2/3 of the Senate. You only need a majority in the House, but you need 2/3 of the Senate. But I mean, if those articles of impeachment were to be drafted and forwarded to you for consideration, what would your thought process be on something like that?
Well, first of all, I'd have to see what the articles were. High crimes and misdemeanors, treason, bribery. How are these terms defined, and what are they using to justify the article? If I think it's fluff, then I would vote against it. If there's something really legit, something solid, substantial, then I'd have to vote for it. Wrong is wrong and right is right. That's the way I am. I don't care what party he is or whatever. I'm there on principle. I'm not there on anything else.
Help Democrats out here for a second. Each party's kind of struggling to find their message right now, and they're testing the waters with some. I think Democrats should just vote. But where are the Democrats missing the message? Where are I guess even both parties. But in especially the effect of Donald Trump. I mean, the guy's tough guy, man. He takes it from 100 different ways, and
every day,
and it seems like he just wants more. Keep it coming. And would love actually to see a Democrat almost the same way. For years I've been really unhappy with Democrats not having a strong backbone and not being tough enough to stand up to things. So, in becoming kind of complacent with Trump, I do, I do kind of see that as something I don't admire or anything like that.
It's a virtue, though. It's a virtue.
Well, it would be nice to have that on our side too sometimes. But where are Democrats missing on trying to engage people in concern with Donald Trump, and where should they be looking at?
Oh man,
I mean, it's so compelling, especially from somebody that's studied psychology, that evangelicals, that bikers, that cowboys would put their faith behind somebody who's never driven a nail in their life, who's never shoveled, a ditch, who's never
he shoveled other stuff though,
besides a groundbreaking.
Well, I think that what the Democrats are missing is someone who's real. Donald Trump came across as someone who was real. And when I say real, I mean someone who is not speaking sound bites.
And not the entertainment side
polished,
of it.
Yeah. Saying the right thing, being politically correct. I think that had a lot to do with his success.
Sort of an LBJ type of,
Yeah. You need someone who is real. I mean, I'm real. You don't see an entourage with me. I don't come in, with a parade of cars or anything like that. Don't raise a whole lot of money. I speak the truth. As best I know. And that's what I think. And not only Democrats, the Democrats are missing that, yes. But we as a country need that across the board. Democrats, Republicans, and we need people who are real, people who are dedicated. Trump he got in there pretty much on his own money. And so he didn't have to kiss anyone's rear end and play that game. And that's what we need, period. The Democrats need, it would help the Democrats a lot. From my perspective, if they had someone who was the same way, who was not concerned about the forces of money, but was really dedicated to the people. Trump came across as someone who was really dedicated to the people. Not everybody, but to the people.
Came across that way, or
came across that way?
Yeah, came across that way.
Yeah, he came across that way. I'm here for you. I'm here for the common man, the average person. And so the Democrats did that same thing. What a difference it would make.
Yeah, there's that political argument of hope versus fear and anger, and they talk about how, hope can beat fear and anger, but darn, fear and anger really work.
Their motive, yeah.
And that's advertising too.
It is.
And he knows quite a bit about that stuff.
Well, he knows what he's doing. Yeah. So.
Who do you admire? I mean, who do you admire when you look at, maybe not even just the political landscape. I mean, who do you admire that's in the public realm that you say that person is representing themselves and representing some ideas that I really respect, and I maybe like to have dinner with that person, or I'd like to emulate in some way that person.
The only person that I really care about was Martin Luther King. It was when I was in Atlanta. It was weird. They had a suit that he wore. And it was in the showcase. And I stood next to that suit, and I got this rush, this energy. And I also went to the Lorraine Motel where he was shot, and I stood at the very spot where he was shot. And he means a lot to me because, again, he gave so much. He sacrificed his family, he sacrificed his life, not so that we could wear bling, but so that we could have opportunities. And so he exposed the government, the Vietnam War, on and on and on. Somebody who was so willing to give of themselves, someone who was selfless instead of selfish. And so that's the only person that even comes close to me even thinking about.
Yeah. There was a lot in the middle to end of his life. There was a lot of, I don't want to use the word controversy, but there was this idea that maybe the Black community in some sense got beyond King, that King's pacifism was passe, that the Malcolm X's of the world, the Stokely Carmichaels of the world had the better idea that you needed to meet force with force and by any means necessary. And at the end of his life, King maybe was brought back a little bit by being assassinated in terms of the consciousness. Is there something to that idea, do you think?
Well, the Black community it's diverse. You have people, and probably the younger people, who were just fed up and were not willing to wait. They're angry. They want change now. We want to get it this way. We want to shoot everybody down. Whereas King took a more pragmatic and safer approach. But during that time, there was just so much anger. Like, living through the race riots in Cleveland, you could see, living through the race riots, there was just so much anger. And people were just fed up. They wanted solutions right away. They didn't want to legislate anything. We want change right now because we're fed up. We're angry. We can't live over there. We can't work over there. You don't give us jobs. We can't go to school. We can't do. And there was just so much frustration. I think that's a better word, frustration than anger.
Suffering, true suffering.
Well, yeah. You have to shop at the small stores and worry about getting shot by the owner. You can't go out into the suburbs. The police are always harassing you. So there was a lot of frustration and anger that these people were just flat out tired of. And so Malcolm X appealed to that.
The frustration,
yeah.
Yeah. And do you think, we only really have a couple minutes left here, but do you think that, and it's hard for us that aren't in the community to say this and even really ask this question, but is it better? Do you feel like, you think back about your life as a young man, you think back to your life now, and, from the outside looking at me, you could say, well, yeah, but look how far we've come, right? But that's not maybe for me to say. Do you feel like that progress has been earned, that it's been something that we should be proud of, think about, or is it, are we still frustrated that we aren't where we need to be yet?
I think I'm more frustrated. In the book that I'm writing, one of the stats that I came across, 40% of all practicing Black dentists went to one dental school. And that was a Black dental school called Meharry in Nashville. That's progress.
40%.
One school.
Yeah.
There are fewer Blacks in medicine now than there were in 1978.
Wait.
Yeah.
Fewer as a percentage or fewer total?
Total.
Wow.
Yeah, total. The numbers are shrinking. So no, I don't see progress. We've got, I don't know what the exact number is. We have probably about 1 million Blacks in jail right now or incarcerated. There are cases in some cities where a young person up to the age of about 24, about 1/3 of them will experience incarceration by the time they're 24. So no, we have not made the progress that we think we should have. Trump is saying that we have the lowest Black unemployment on record. I don't believe that for one second, especially when you look at the number as far as the amount of income. Blacks are less than half of the income of whites. And so is that anything to gloat about, that we have the lowest unemployment, which I disagree with, when you have only half the income? So no, I don't see.
I've been watching it for years. Graduation rates are down.
Yeah.
School systems are crumbling, and in those communities, and those are the results of those types of things.
Yeah. The state of California, the beautiful liberal state of California, in 2015 graduated only 40 Black medical students. 40 in California. So as a Black medical student in California, you're literally 1 in a million.
Wow.
Yeah.
I almost want to say that can't be right, but I'm going to trust you because I haven't researched and you obviously have. That just sounds ridiculous to me.
I know. 40.
Wow. Well, I hate to leave it there, but we're at the end of our segment.
We're going for another one.
We're going to have you back. We're going to do more because that was another really great segment.
I love it.
Gregory Cheadle did a great job. Thank you for doing that. That's our show, everybody. Thanks again to Gregory Cheadle.
Thank you so much
for joining us, coming down to Chico and joining us. Don't forget, all you out there, NorCal News Now is available wherever you download your podcast. So check us out and subscribe. We can also be found on Facebook at NorCal News Now, where you can post your comments and suggestions for upcoming podcast topics and guests. So thanks all of you for listening in. We'll be back at you soon with another episode of NorCal News Now. So long.